to sworn testimony, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But you can, but as an aside, you can judge someone's processing speed at any time. Like I'm judging yours right now, you're judging mine. We all judge processing speed as a baseline because of what we know about each other. I would say your processing speed right now is not slow. So, I mean, we're judging processing speed. I'm just saying to you.
Yeah. But no, any of Mr. Depp's other portrayals in movies, did that affect your analysis of processing speed?
Only I've seen him interact on interviews, and that was it.
Right.
When he wasn't in movies.
Right. But Willy Wonka doesn't matter to you? You see him in that movie, Charlie and Chocolate Factory? Did you look at that one when you were comparing his processing speed?
Do I have to answer that question, Your Honor?
You have to answer questions. Yes, sir.
No, you'll be happy to know I didn't see Willy Wonka. I didn't see 21 Jump Street when it happened, or whatever it was about. No, I did not.
All right. You made a very kind admission, I think, early on in your deposition, that you're not claiming to be a better actor than Mr. Depp. That's correct, isn't it?
100%.
All right. But with respect to acting, you know that actors actually rehearse for their parts and work on the language, diction, timing of their dialogue as part of that rehearsal?
If you say that, I'm not an actor, so I don't know what goes on. I can't tell you. I have no idea what goes on in acting.
Okay. But you don't know enough about acting to know whether actors rehearse?
Sir, I am not an expert in acting. I have no idea what an actor does.
Okay. During your deposition, what were the circumstances under which you decided to call Mr. Depp an idiot?
Under somebody call Mr. Depp an idiot?
Yeah, you called Mr. Depp an idiot in your deposition.
Why okay. So I think it was in the context. I think it was in the, you probably should read the context of it, because I think the context was, and I'm trying to think back, okay? And what I thought it was related to was if you're coming to some deposition, okay? And again, I'm thinking back, so you have it in front of you. I don't. So I'm thinking back where he's coming in from Europe for a deposition, video deposition that he gave, and he took an overnight the night before. And what I think I said was that if you're going to do a major thing to a trial that you're involved with, I think you'd be an idiot to come in the night before.
All right.
So I didn't call Mr. Depp an idiot. I certainly called that planning an idiot. I didn't call him an idiot.
So the words, so I mean he's an idiot, are mistranscribed?
No, I'm sure, again, if I said it in that, if you're just reading one line, one snippet, I'm sure it was in the context I just said. But again, you have it in front of you, I don't.
Yeah. Is idiot a professional opinion?
I wasn't rendering professional opinion.
Yeah.
No.
Is it a psychiatric opinion?
And that follows the Goldwater rule.
How does it follow the?
Oh, you just said that I'm not rendering a professional opinion. I just said idiot. That's not a Goldwater.
So idiot is not a professional opinion? Mm-hmm. Is it your practice to describe people as idiots?
My practice to describe people, in my practice? No, I don't describe people, my clinical cases as idiots, or patients as idiots, or victims as idiots. No, sir.
But you sat for a deposition in this case and described the plaintiff as an idiot, correct?
You gave me 9 hours of deposition, and if I said the word idiot, it was an idiot in planning. It wasn't making him an idiot. I don't know Mr. Depp's IQ. I don't know his overall functioning. So therefore, if I said it, it was an idiot in planning, which is what I meant to come across as.
All right. So you did say you don't know his overall functioning, but you made some testimony today as to some evaluations you made relative to his functioning. You would agree with me that it's probably a good idea to think about the questions that are asked you in a court proceeding before answering them.
Am I allowed to answer that question?
Yes.
Okay. So what I meant by function, what I said by function, I believe that his agent reported how late he was showing up to every movie while the cast is waiting for him. I believe that would be an impairment. If I showed up late for that, I would not be here right now, would not have a job. Okay? I believe the thing was in terms of balking out of treatment for substance rehab that his doctor is prescribing for him. So if you're asking me if that's an impairment of functioning, I would say I'm very much substantiated in that.
I'm trying to understand how you got to this notion of cognitive decline. And I thought it was based, at least in part, on the manner in which he testified.
I'm sorry, what?
On the manner in which he testified.
On the manner, I'm sorry, I'm not being difficult. I can't hear. I'm sorry. On what?
I was asking you about the cognitive decline
Yes.
testimony that you made.
Yes.
And it was my understanding that at least a portion of that testimony that you rendered was that you derived some evidence of cognitive decline from the way Mr. Depp testified.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's what I said, yes.
Right. And so all I'm asking you is, don't you think it's a good idea when you're in the middle of a court proceeding to answer questions carefully?
Again, professionally, we diagnose patients with a neurocog disorder by gross evaluation all the time with cognitive. On the thought that, again, age normal controls, I'm just saying, age normative controls does not put a 58-year-old gentleman at that processing. That's all I'm saying. That's
Right.
all I said.
And you derived this without ever once talking to the man.
You mean me directly talking to him? Because we know how I derived it. So you're talking about me directly talking to him?
Yeah, you never talked.
No, I've never talked to him.
Right. And this exam you gave, well, you did talk about Dr. Blaustein, right?
Yes, sir.
And you understand that the entirety of Dr. Blaustein's medical records are 12 pages of handwritten notes.
The important part was what I said. For me, as an example of cognition, which I'm trying to prove, which is what you asked me, the important part was what I said. And that was irrefutable.
The important part is that he gave the mini mental status exam.
Yes, sir.
All right.
That's
Let's talk about the mini mental status exam. Scored on a 30-point scale, right?
Yes.
All right. And it's an exam that basically is most often used for what, Alzheimer's, dementia, those kind of testing.
It's an exam that tests cognition in all psychiatric illnesses, not just Alzheimer's. It was made for dementia, for Alzheimer's, but is the standard, has been the standard for testing cognition in all psychiatric illness, substance use disorders included.
Okay. Now, there is an element of that exam that requires drawing, correct?
Yes.
So you don't know what drawing Mr. Depp did or whether the drawing should have been fully scored.
I wasn't questioning his visual, spatial, perceptual skills, which is what that does.
Right. And you don't know what score Mr. Depp received on the exam.
I was very specific. I know 3 words, not remembering at 5 minutes. That's all I said.
3 words, not remembering 5 minutes, and he remembered one of them, right?
From what I understand, you didn't remember any of them.
All right. Memory on the exam, out of the 30 points, what's it worth? 3. 3, right? Memory is 3 out of the 30.
Yeah, memory's 3.
Okay.
But again, the memory section in and of itself tests memory. That's the only question that tests memory, only section that actually tests memory.
So the memory section tests memory. It's the only section you testified about. And for all you know, that with respect to the exam that you're relying on, Mr. Depp scored 27 out of 30.
And that would be telling, though, cognitive, if you score 27 out of 30 and you miss 3 points on memory. That would be very telling.
You don't know if Mr. Depp had been up all night the night before.
Again, you wouldn't expect to not recall any words at 3 minutes unless there's a cognitive issue.
You don't know if Mr. Depp was high.
And again, now that could affect memory, but I'm not refuting that. I'm not refuting that at all. He could have been high, he could have been drunk, he could have been using cocaine, and that would absolutely affect his memory, which is what I said. Yes, you're right.
So ultimately, you have no idea what state Mr. Depp was in at the time he took the exam that you're relying on.
Short of what you just said about drugs and alcohol, okay, there shouldn't be a reason why a 58-year-old also with strokes and other neurocognitive conditions, but short of that, there shouldn't be a really good reason why someone at that age shouldn't come up with at least one. But an answer.
But wait a minute, you started that question with short of drugs and alcohol, and spent 35 minutes talking about his use of drugs and alcohol. Isn't that right?
Oh, I'm agreeing. I thought I agreed with you. I think I agreed. I said that drugs and alcohol can absolutely affect cognition. I'm not sure. I agree, but I'm not sure if that's a problem. I agree with you on that.
All right. So you don't know, one way or the other, how he scored on the exam. You don't know whether he was at the time on drugs and alcohol, but you're going to rely on it in your testimony to say that he's cognitively impaired.
Which is what we do in clinical medicine, sir.
Okay. You rely on tests that you don't know when it was administered, you don't know the score of the test, and you don't know the state of the person being tested, but you're going to rely on it anyway.
Again, if we had to know every test, when people get the mini-mental state exam, we have no idea clinically if they are high, wasted, stoned, stroke. We have no idea. So if you're going to say that, that means everybody needs a drug test before they do a mini-mental study, and that's not the standard of care. And I think you know that. So
let's talk a little bit about this word you kept using, correlation. You know the word, right?
yes.
Correlation and causation aren't the same thing, are they, sir?
No, they're not the same thing.
No. How are they different?
Correlation is consistent with causation, means direct link.
Can you say that again? You were so fast I didn't hear it.
Oh, sorry about that. Correlation is a risk for something happening. Causation is a direct link.
Right. So just because something's correlated doesn't mean it's going to happen.
100%.
Right.
100%.
Like lung cancer, for instance. Smoking is very highly correlated with lung cancer, right?
Yeah, and there's certainly a link
Right.
to lung cancer and smoking.
Right. But not all smokers get lung cancer.
Not all smokers do. No one, like I said, no one fits the curve perfectly.
Right. And you made repeated testimony to all of us. All of us do this. All of us do that. Mm-hmm. Your suggestion about all of us is you're just looking at the world as a sample and not at any particular individual, correct?
What I'm looking at is that I'm not talking about an individual, how they can or cannot be resistant. What I'm saying is invariably, when you use substances, this is going to happen. Now, is there a 0.05% chance that someone who does? Absolutely there is. But is that medical degree of certainty? Absolutely not.
A 0.05% chance of what, sir?
Of eventually developing symptoms. If you're using excessively, eventually you're going to develop symptoms.
All right. But risk factors tell us nothing about any one particular individual, do they, sir?
No. Again, risk factors tell us nothing except that they have it, they're at a higher likelihood of developing it. That's
right.
what it tells us.
But you did a whole litany of risk factors relative to IPV.
Yes.
Right. And none of those risk factors tell us anything specifically about an individual.
Other than they're at higher risk. Right.
Right. So someone could have every single risk factor for IPV and never commit IPV, right?
It would be, again, if you're going to say a medical degree of probability, the answer is They will. But if you're saying uniformly, the answer is no.
Right. IPV can occur without substance abuse.
Oh, sure.
Someone can abuse substances without ever perpetrating IPV.
Again, absolutely. But, again, you are saying different than what I said. I did not say abusing substance. I said substance use disorder. Those are two different things, because there are surely people who use substances that do not engage in any violence, do not become psychotic, nothing at all. So
And that's
absolutely.
equally true of people who have substance abuse disorder. There are certainly people who have substance abuse disorder who don't commit IPV, correct?
They are saying people who have substance use disorders, the majority of them, over 50% do. So over 50% do. So that's medical.
The answer is yes.
As you said, not everyone who smokes gets lung cancer.
So there are significant numbers of people. You said it was over 50, so you'd say 40% of the people who have substance abuse disorder don't commit IPV?
And those are the ones that do not have IPV risk factors, right? So we're talking about people
Wait a
who
minute.
don't.
Isn't substance abuse disorder an IPV risk factor?
Oh, yeah. These are other people that don't have other risk factors, right?
Right. But again, we're talking about people in general. You don't know anything about any particular individual as to whether anybody's going to commit IPV.
If statistics follow through, all we can say is more than 50%, 70% will. If you combine more risk factors you have, the more likely you're going to develop the illness. If you smoke cigarettes once, that might not correlate to lung cancer. If you smoke it chronically, that might.
Right.
So that's all I'm
we're
saying.
talking about individuals here. You either have lung cancer or you don't, right?
If you're smoking.
Right.
Right.
You either commit IPV or you didn't.
Oh, I mean, yeah, you either did or you didn't, yes.
Right. So you took some issue with me because I was asking about substance abuse generally, and you wanted me to talk about the disorder. I asked you earlier about narcissistic personality disorder, and you haven't made that diagnosis. You've just talked about the traits, right?
Yes.
And somebody can have these narcissistic personality traits and substance abuse disorder and never commit IPV, right?
So, along that line,
Right.
about 80 to 90% of people who commit IPV have a personality disorder. So the answer is less than about 10% obviously do not.
Right. There are more close links with IPV for borderline personality disorder than narcissistic personality disorder. Correct, sir?
I'm not going to agree with that.
No?
I'm not saying there are more links. I would say to you, there are absolute. If you're asking me if there are links, the answer is absolutely. If you're saying to me more, I can show studies say yes, so studies say that. That has not been absolutely definitively correlated. No.
No.
Absolutely not.
MDMA. What is it?
Ecstasy.
Yeah. And what's the normal dosage of ecstasy for people who use ecstasy?
Again, I couldn't tell you the quote unquote normal dose because honestly speaking, no one knows what they're getting when they're using it, right? It's not regulated, so.
But the effects of ecstasy enhance sense of well-being?
At low doses, the answer is yes. I'm going to gather when you're using it at higher doses and develop tolerance, you develop the sympathomimetic effects, which are not so enhanced well-being.
Increased extroversion, that's a symptom?
Again, at lower doses, you are 100% right. At low amounts, you are 100% right. It is an entactogen. We feel closer to people. That's what people who use it say. They feel close to people, warmth to people, 100%. But with continual use and higher doses, it could be fatal.
Right.
So that's not well-being. I don't know if I call that well-being.
So continued use at higher doses, MDMA can be fatal, correct?
Correct.
What if you took 8 to 10 tablets of MDMA?
What if you took again, you don't know what it's very hard to say that. You don't know what it's, what's the word I'm looking for? Contaminated with, okay? You can't just say, hey, let me just take 8 to 10 pure ecstasy and see what happens. That's not gonna happen. So what I would say to you, again, because substance abuse are unpredictable, they are not regulated, no one knows what they're going to. No one has any idea whether it's going to cause this empathic entactogen effect at very low doses, or is it going to cause the increase, it's like a stimulant, like cocaine and stuff we talked about like that. No one knows what's going to happen. It's not regulated. And no one knows if you're using with other substances either, like other stimulants.
Or if you mix it with alcohol.
Or if you mix it with alcohol. No one knows if it's going to be potentially worse.
Right. But this is a potentially lethal combination. 8 to 10 MDMA tablets and alcohol.
This is a potentially toxic combination.
Right.
Can it kill you? Yeah, I mean, it is a potentially toxic combination. That's true.
Ever heard of someone cutting off their own finger on MDMA?
Have I ever heard of it?
Yeah.
No, I can only give you one example.
Hadn't seen that one before. Okay. So, Seroquel. That one puts you to sleep, right?
If you want to phrase a barbiturate putting you to sleep, then the answer is yes.
Yeah, you heard Mr. Depp talking about sometimes being on the nod, right?
And again, I think I explained Seroquel very well this morning.
Good. I'm going to ask him a few more questions.
Oh, okay. Okay.
All right. You kept making references to street value. Why were you doing that?
Because that's why people with substance use disorder use quetiapine and Seroquel.
Say it again, I'm sorry.
That's why people who use quetiapine or Seroquel it sells on the street because it's so barbiturate-like in effect.
Right, but you said that Mr. Depp had a prescription.
There are many substance use disorder patients who have prescriptions for Adderall and quetiapine from their doctor, and that doesn't mean they're not getting high out of it. That doesn't take much. Doctors like to believe what patients have to say. They're not going to go in there being expert witness testimony. All I'm telling you is that in people who have substance use disorder, it is not uncommon, and the thought was initially that because quetiapine was not addicting, that it's safe to give in people with substance use disorders, when in fact, we absolutely know it has street value. We absolutely know that for a fact.
Right, but my point about this is you made a bunch of testimony about street value, but you knew at the time you made the testimony that Mr. Depp, in fact, had a prescription.
He also had a prescription for oxycodone and roxicodone. Does that count? Because that's also probably not a good thing. Just because you have a prescription doesn't mean that...
I think Mr. Depp would agree with you it wasn't a good thing.
Just because you have a prescription doesn't mean you can't abuse it.
No, I'm not suggesting you're abusing it. I'm just wondering why your testimony was in any way tied to street value when every single drug you referenced, Mr. Depp had legally.
Again, you can have prescription substance abuse, and we know that, correct? No, I shouldn't be asking that. We can have prescription substance use disorders, and that's not uncommon if you look at the opiate epidemic that we're living in right now. We can have that. That's not an uncommon thing. Unfortunate, but uncommon. Not uncommon.
So, Seroquel, I think you described as a sleeping agent when used off-label?
When I saw what?
Sleeping agent, Seroquel, when used off-label?
When used off-label, it's used. It can be used sleeping agent, yes.
Right. So, Mr. Depp's use of Seroquel could account for some of the photos we saw in this trial, where he's asleep in a chair?
Again, what I would say to you is that if you have a substance use disorder, You are using it to be knocked out. Yes, I agree. But I'm not sure at the end of the day if she had vomitus over you either, because I've never seen Sarah Will do that. So when he was passed out in the chair, he also had vomitus over him. I've never seen Sarah Will do that ever.
Neurontin is another one of the drugs you testified about. That one's also prescribed, right?
Yes, it is.
And what's the prescription for that?
What's it used for? And what's its indication, or what's its
Yeah,
used
what's its indication?
I mean, its indication is for seizures. It may have one pain indication. Again, I'm not a neurologist, so I can't tell you exactly if it does. But it's chronically used off-label for pain. It's used off-label for anxiety.
Right. And what's its effect? That's another one that'll put you to sleep, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, sure, 100%.
Right. And you made reference to a picture. There's been testimony around that picture that Mr. Depp fell asleep with ice cream in his hand. That's not vomitous, right?
I was told it was vomitous.
Okay. You talked about the fact that Mr. Depp indicates that from time to time he uses an earpiece.
I read that, yes.
Okay. Did you read the testimony of Mr. Wyatt, who told you what was being pumped into that earpiece?
Yeah, I mean, if I remember right, I mean, I think it was lines, right?
No, it was music.
It was music, not his line?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So if Mr. Depp was listening to music rather than being fed his lines, does that change your opinion as to his cognitive function?
If he was never fed his lines through the earpiece, which I know he was, but read he was, and that may have been that example, Mr. Wyatt may have said that it was music. I guess the question is, were you having the music during the actual talking of your lines? Is that what you're saying to me?
Well, if you can do two things at once, that's a pretty high cognitive function, isn't it, sir?
It's a very good point, actually. Divided attention is something humans have a lot of trouble in. Yeah. So, for instance, we have trouble driving and putting on using our cell phones and direct. So, divided attention, humans actually are not very good at. I'll put that out there.
But
in general, not just Mr. Depp, in general.
But Mr. Depp is pretty good at acting. You acknowledge that early on.
Absolutely. Well, better than me, so I know that.
Because you don't act. In fact, you don't know about acting.
You're right. I have no idea about acting.
And you don't know how prevalent the use of earpieces are in acting.
Again, I know nothing about acting.
Irrespective of the fact you know nothing about acting, you've testified that Mr. Depp's use of an earpiece is somehow a cognitive deficit?
So if I was giving a lecture and I was fed my lines, I would think there's a cognitive deficit. And maybe I'm wrong. Like I said, maybe I could be wrong. Maybe Hollywood stars get lines fed to them through earpieces all the time, and I don't know. That could be said. It sounded to me to be unusual if you're doing a movie and you don't know the lines. But like you said, I'm just judging it on what I do with lectures, and that would never happen.
If you gave lectures, you wouldn't use an earpiece, but you're not going to tell anybody how to act.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
I said if you gave lectures, you wouldn't use an earpiece, but you're not telling anybody how to act.
Right, I would not use an earpiece during lectures.
Right.
But I don't know what the standard for standard as Hollywood is for that. I have no idea.
Your testimony about the use of an earpiece, as maybe you were wrong. You're comfortable with the fact that you may have made a mistake there?
No, because I think in the basis of what I've read about it, I'm comfortable that I don't believe that actors are routinely given their entire script through earpieces. I find that hard to believe.
Yeah, but there's not one whit of evidence that this ever happened here.
I guess what I said. I just said I find it hard to believe. I didn't say it. I said I find it hard to believe. That's all I said.
Oh, yeah, but what you found hard to believe, sir, was that every line of the script was pumped through an earpiece. Where did you ever get the idea that that occurred?
That's what I have been. That's what I read in the court review, the court evidence. That's where I got it from.
Right. And you know whether Marlon Brando used an earpiece?
Whether isn't he dead?
Yeah.
So the answer is no. He does not use one now.
Oh, no, I used the past tense. Sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. I know nothing. I will concede to you. I know nothing about acting. I will concede to you 100%. If that is the standard and people are done that acting, then I apologize and that was wrong on my part. If that's the standard, I'm wrong. I don't know.
Okay.